It's Miss Krystal. It's Wednesday. Let's have a book talk. Anyways, today's theme is gonna be just like random stuff. So it's really just things that I thought were very interesting that don't fit into any of the categories that I've done previously. Okay, first things first, I'm gonna start with my teen and YA, okay? So this is The Lightness of Hands, and it is about this girl, Ellie. Ellie is living with her father, who is a successful magician for a time. He does this huge trick though, and it goes like completely awry. And he's kind of like tumbled out of favor, and he just is doing like birthday parties and stuff now, like low rate gigs. And she's living in an RV with him and doing homeschooling in order to help him with the gigs and with traveling, which means that she doesn't have very many familial or personal connections outside of her father, which makes her very lonely. Now the gigs dry up, and so they don't have any insurance anymore. And so that means that Ellie is having to face her bipolar 2 disorder without any like psychological or psychiatric help. And then also her dad has a heart condition and he's not able to afford the medication for that. And so they get a call from this successful duo of magicians that ask him to redo the trick that launched him, you know, into the life that he's currently living. And he says no because he thinks it's too dangerous, but Ellie takes him up on the offer without consulting her father. And so she tricks him into traveling across the country to try to get to this trick in time. Now, obviously, it doesn't work, but, like, I don't know if the trick works, but it doesn't work as in her lies they catch up to her. And it's kind of about, like, tumbling into your own mental disorder. It's about having the best intentions, but not doing the best things to get what you want, essentially. And I think it was a very interesting read. So, okay, next thing, Scott Pilgrim. So if you haven't heard of Scott Pilgrim, then like I don't know, you've been living under a rock, or you're like really young. I don't know, but I remember Scott Pilgrim. It was a comic book series that started in like 2004, I guess, and then there was a movie, and there also was like a video game for a time. Yeah, so Oni Press re-released Scott Pilgrim as like full color illustrations. They put 2 novels into one, so these are really thick books, but it's still just as good as it was. And it's just about this kid, Scott, and he's 23, and he like is in a band, and he like has a crush on this girl, Ramona, but in order to date her, he has to defeat her 7 exes, who are all these like really weird characters. So it's kind of like a funny take on what is it, epic like battle series, and I really liked it. A lot of people really liked it. And if you want to give it a reread, it's worth it. If you want to pass it on to the next generation, that's also worth it. So give it a shot. Okay, next ones. These are going to be in middle grade. So this one is King and the Dragonflies. King and the Dragonflies, it's a small book, but it's kind of a heavy read. Lots of tough topics in here. It's about this kid, Kingston. His brother dies unexpectedly, Khaled, and King kind of deals with that grief by imagining that his brother didn't die, that he morphed into a dragonfly, and he goes down to the bayou to look for his brother amongst the dragonflies kind of every day after school. And then in the midst of all this, he is feeling some sort of way because he can't talk to his best friend, Sandy. Sandy came out to him as gay, and now his brother, before he died, Khaled, told King not to hang out with Sandy anymore because people will assume that King is gay if he's hanging out with another kid who's gay. And so he stops hanging out and stops talking to Sandy. But then after this grief strikes and everything, Sandy starts to camp out in his backyard, in King's backyard, to get away from his abusive father, who runs the police department. And so King is trying to help his friend, and as he's reconnecting with him, he's having to like face his own grief and also face what he did to Sandy, and also face his own feelings about his own sexuality. So I think it's a good like coming of age short little novel, but it packs a punch. And yeah, I say adults and kids can read this one. It's so good, seriously. Okay, next thing, When You Trap a Tiger. So When You Trap a Tiger is about, what's this girl's name? Lily. So Lily and her Korean grandmother. Her Korean grandmother told her all these traditional Korean folk tales and fairy tales growing up. So they move back in, her family, they come to stay with her grandmother while her health is failing. So she's basically at the end of her life. And but Lily discovers like one of the tigers come from her grandmother's old folk tales. They like come from the story, and they tell her that her grandmother stole something from them a long time ago, and they want it back. And in order to get it back, they're willing to grant her grandmother's health. And so Lily goes on this journey to try to find the thing that her grandmother stole. And but as always, never ends up the way she thought it would. These tigers are tricking her in some sort of way. And it's just about that. So if you want to know more about like Korean folk tales and fairy tales and that culture, it's definitely a good start. Okay, so those are some random reads, just good books. Yeah, go get something to read.